Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
Everybody, this is a pretty thorough dive into what my philosophy is on getting these kids from womb, or that is to say like what we can do before they're actually born, to boom, or what that is to say that successful young adults, or actually just to reach their potential, right? So how do we raise game changers? And all the science and some anecdotes for what I've looked into in an effort to make my children the best versions of themselves, athletically speaking. Obviously, I have hopes for everything, but this is focusing more so on athletics and reaching physical potential. For those of you who don't know me, I mean, happiness and health are more important to me than my kids scoring goals or winning awards and medals. I do believe we can reach both, though. So I think both can be accomplished. I want my kids to reach their potential, not interested in being like a dad who shoves it down their throat. I want them to want it more than I want it. So as long as they are interested, I'll be pursuing the ideas here. Being healthy is not an option. Being a competitive athlete is an option. Got them involved in sports now, but if and when the time comes that they don't want to be involved in that anymore, there will be a discussion. It's not like they have to do these things for the rest of their lives. I'm going to be forcing them to be healthy, and hopefully they carry that health out into physical performance. That's my hope. Yeah. So just so everybody knows, my kids are not being forced against their will to do sporting practices throughout their childhood. All right, so one of the books that we'll talk about on repeat today is Long-Term Athlete Development. So, and there's a quote I pulled from it, is that the greatest predictor of expertise is the number of hours spent practicing a skill. Always been interested in human growth and development, even before becoming a family man or a father. But to have your own kids to experiment with it's a treat. It's a privilege. Kind of had a fun experience. If you see that image on the left, that ultrasound, kind of had a fun experience as the doctor ultrasounding my firstborn Matilda. It kind of like gave me some crazy look. She's like, the baby's like flexing inside the womb. She's like, I've never seen that before. And obviously, like that makes me smile ear to ear. And yeah, my daughter's flexing in the womb. And who knows if that's because I've flexed about 1,000,000 times leading up to her conception, or what the deal was. They said she's got pretty good muscle tone, like to be able to see it over the ultrasound. And then when Matilda was born, she was actually able to manipulate her head a little bit on day 1. And the nurses were like taken back from that. So I don't know why Matilda was a little bit on the muscular side at birth. She was born a few weeks early, so what I'm told is that babies will grow and mature those first 8 months or so, and that last ninth month is actually just for them to fatten up. So Matilda was born pretty early, like 3.5 weeks early, completely healthy, but just kind of lean. So she had some muscle, and she was also kind of lean because she didn't get those last few weeks to stay in utero and fatten up a little bit. So she's been a fun kind of experiment from the start, is just coming out and being kind of unique. In that the doctors ahead of time were just kind of like noticing, the doctors and nurses were kind of noticing some different things about her. So whether nature has kind of set her up for success, I'm not sure, but I'm going to nurture her success as much as I can. And, on the picture on the right, there is her kissing her biceps. And we've got a little video here of us doing an obstacle course, which is, this is just the beginning. We do quite a few obstacle courses now. So, nature made her healthy, fortunately for us, but we're also trying to nurture it with dance, play, sports, obstacle courses, lots of movement. She goes through. She actually had a fear of going under things when she was little. So crawling under those things is actually kind of a win for us. She does a little victory dance. She kisses the biceps, a little more victory dancing. It's all good. All right. So when talking about nature versus nurture, there are a lot of MLB players, Major League Baseball players, who had fathers that were also in the MLB. So You're born with a lot of the same physical attributes, but also you're raised within that same culture and environment, things like that, and it's really leading to more success. So you got to think there's probably some good major league players they grew up playing soccer or hockey or something like that, and they just never quite made it to the baseball field. So again, what are we doing to take our children's potential and steer them towards success? As you can see, that faded picture on the right there is the Manning family has had some success with the game of football. Is the skill sets plus putting them around the right culture and the right teams. It's important to help find a place where your children can be successful. If you look at a few of these books here, and I will reference these books again later on. The Sports Gene, great little book, talks about why different populations are good at different sports, and it's a combination of nature versus nurture, and it looks at it from different lenses, both those lenses of nature versus nurture. Looks at those on a regular basis. So great anecdotal, great anecdotal and pseudoscience in there. So if you're trying to figure out why certain groups are better at sports than others, that's a great book to pick up. If you're trying to maybe figure out what your children should do, whether they're your own athletes or your actual biological children, still a good read. And then Range has a big impact on my philosophy of what we're doing with these kids. And this, the subtitle there is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And the idea is that the example given is that Tiger Woods is, the greatest golfer, one of the greatest golfers ever. And that a lot of people would kind of say, well, yeah, he's been golfing since he was like 2 years old. And the book Range identifies that it's actually even more unique that Tiger Woods is a fantastic golfer, because most people who are exposed to so much of a unique, specialized sport from an early age will usually burn out, whether it's injury or mentally they just break down. And the case made through the book is that it looks at Tiger Woods and then it looks at a bunch of other athletes as well. And the more common narrative for the other athletes, I mean, you're talking about like your Kobe Bryant's, your Wayne Gretzky's, fantastic athletes who have basically reached the top level of human potential in other sports. It is more common to be a fantastic athlete if you diversify your athletic endeavors in your youth. Being a multi-sport athlete is more likely to help you be a specialist later on. If you're a multi-sport athlete until about your mid-teens, that will help you succeed later on. I'm repeating that a few times for a reason, because most people think that specialization is the greatest advantage they have. And the book Range might help change your mind. And I hope that it does, because for many reasons, injuries, psychological burnout, motivation, whatever it is, being a child specializing in one sport year round is not the healthiest for them. That third text, Developing Sport Expertise, the data just says that not specializing until as early as 12 or 14 is actually beneficial for the long-term benefits for athletes. All right, so just a couple of data points here. 88% of the 253 athletes drafted into the recent NFL draft were in multiple sports. They're multi-sport athletes in high school. All right, so that's as of 2025, actually, so as recent as it gets. Let's see, NBA, they say they were more likely to play. Multi-sport athletes outperformed single-sport athletes on key metrics. So the athletes played basketball but also played other sports. They actually end up becoming better basketball players. They're more likely to play more games and had a higher likelihood of still being active in the league at the time of the study. Okay. So injury rates. Multi-sport athletes have lower injury rates in the NBA. Performance-wise, multi-sport athletes participate in 78.4% of their team's games versus 72.8% for single-sport athletes. So NFL as well as NBA, being a multi-sport athlete is like a superpower. It enhances your performance. Dr. Kate Shanahan, she writes a book called Deep Nutrition. In it, she talks about all these really great approaches to nutrition and how we can feed our families and feed our children, things that are going to help make them healthy, right? So maybe everybody's kind of heard of folic acid and how that helps with developing your central nervous system. But there's other things too. So like activity levels, parents who are physically active and healthy in that manner will actually transfer that in a genetic fashion down to their children. Eating lots of sugar, messing with your blood sugar and insulin levels, this is passed on to the children, especially when the child is in vitro during state of pregnancy, right? So um, mothers who exercise, they have healthier babies. It is so common sense. It seems unreal. It's not just that, you're still playing a role in developing that baby while the bun is in the oven. So make sure that we are eating properly, right? So you treat that kid as if you're improving their health for the rest of their life. And you want to do the best you can with that. For my wife Jess, when she was pregnant with Matilda, really prioritized healthy eating. However, Matilda made it just so sick. She didn't have morning sickness. She had like all day 24-hour sickness. So for those purposes, that top level nutrition, everything from whole foods and all the right foods and things like that. Um, Jess had to, we lowered the bar because of just constant vomiting and issues and things like that. So we started eating more foods that might taste better on the way back up again. Jess had no interest, just nausea, just even being around any kind of meat or anything like that, any kind of like animal proteins really, really gave her digestive distress for months of the pregnancy. It was a tough one. So really take all these ideal philosophies and the real world, and you try to elevate your game as best you can. So the quote goes, "If you have a body, you are an athlete." So all this actually for my kids who are now 5 and 7, they're in better moods, they're happier, they're healthier when we exercise. Their mood improves. We know that down the road, that's going to be the case for adults. Is exercise is an antidepressant, anti-anxiety. It helps prevent disease. So really, yes, I do want my children to be awesome athletes, but my higher priority is their quality and quantity of life. There's children whose mother smoked while pregnant were 1.5 times more likely to have asthma. Children whose grandmother smoked while pregnant were 1.8 times more likely to have asthma. If mom and grandma both smoked, the kids are 2.6 times more likely to have asthma. This is epigenetics, okay? That baby who's never smoked, if mom and grandma smoked, that baby gets asthma. This is epigenetics. Outside stimuli will come in and change the RNA, which will then change your DNA. And so we're going in and we're mutating these little babies ahead of time. And do the wrong thing, you mutate them in the wrong direction. Do the right thing, and there are some signs that we're going to mutate them in the right direction. And so that's exciting for those of you parents who want to kind of um, provide the best possible opportunities for your children to be happy and healthy and maybe even be athletes. The better you do ahead of time, you might have an epigenetic effect on them so that they are better off, not only healthier, but perhaps superior athletes as well. Just enjoyed that book. So it's a couple more notes from this book, Deep Nutrition by Kate Shanahan. It's talking about kind of children, how that firstborn might have biradial symmetry, which means that the theory is that that uterus does not have as much space inside of it as the baby might want or need. And so the baby gets kind of like basically like jammed up a little bit. And so some of the joints might not form perfectly symmetrically and even. And so it talks about how some older siblings may have some more asymmetries within the body. And then secondary to that is that younger children may have a bigger space within the uterus to grow. One of the theories why younger children may be larger. Um, but children who are born in quick succession, it talks about how the mother may not have enough nutrition for the younger child to form in the healthiest with the healthiest DNA. And so what she does is she puts up a couple of pictures in the book, a couple of pictures of celebrity siblings, um, and puts it up on the same day of their own age. So maybe like their 40th birthday. And the younger sibling often looks older. And so they're saying that if mothers, she talks about how mothers in more primitive tribes will birth and then breastfeed for a few years, and that breastfeeding upregulates their prostaglandin, I believe it is, or um, progesterone, and then that progesterone acts as sort of a like a natural birth control, and so that these mothers who are not using birth medically prescribed birth control, they will have children every 3 or 4 years, um, based on like some of the patterns and rhythms that just nature provides. And so it kind of talks about how those shorter gaps may cause a little bit of a lack of health issue there. So if you're out there in your family planning, hopefully those moms are just eating as healthy as they can after that first child to kind of prep their body for the next very challenging round of birth with the next child. Talks a little bit about maybe some like hormone variances, how the firstborn girl may be more masculine, subsequent born girls may be more feminine. So it's nothing I've really observed. I don't have any comments on that. Just of interest. I'm not even confirming that that's accurate. Just of interest. It talks a little bit about oxidative stress and how sugar and vegetable oil can be bad for you in ways other than just maybe like a waistline or just a little bit of like a bigger belly. So again, that kind of like ties into my health approach, not so much my focus on performance. I'm not making gold medals and championship trophies the top priority here. So there's a lot of other things that we want to focus on. All right, so there's quite a few different opportunities for mothers to impact the health and wellness of the baby. So looking at the effects of maternal physical activity during pregnancy. So yeah, when those moms are pregnant and they're working out, as long as they don't overdo it, and there's quite a few rules with gestational strength training. But to train in a healthy and safe fashion is actually turns out it's really, really healthy for those babies. So let's see, let's go through some of the quick points from this article here. It seems to have a positive long-term cardiovascular and neurocognitive effect during childhood and adulthood. So wouldn't you want your child to have a better heart system, cardio system, and neurocognitive benefits? Some data from the past 5 years thus suggest that maternal physical activity during pregnancy has the potential to program the child's physical activity with a persistent effect, simultaneous on the maintenance of an active lifestyle and the control of obesity and its associated metabolic disorders into adulthood. The effect appears stronger among females. Regular physical activity is recommended during pregnancy for the benefit of the unborn child, alongside factors such as eating and the reduction of exposure to toxic substances and stress. Maternal physical activity is one of the determinants of the child's long-term outcome. So, ladies, if you're pregnant, get after it. Go train. This is important. Don't need to have the six-pack, the bloated six-pack, but gosh, really important. We know it impacts there's asthma. It impacts their future obesity and metabolic disorders, neurocognitive benefits, probably everything. If we're just talking about making healthier human beings, this is really important. All right, ladies, it's not just up to you. Men, what you do also impacts your future children here. So it actually adjusts some of the RNA in your sperm, right? So it changes your genetics. It changes what what genetic input you have to go combine with mom's egg to make that baby. Let's see here. In this study, the authors demonstrated that offspring sired by exercise-trained fathers exhibit intrinsic exercise adaptability and improve metabolic parameters compared to those from sedentary fathers. Hey guys, get to training. There you go. Go exercise. It changes the genetics of your children. It improves the quality of human being that's going to be born. Quality of health, pardon me. Quality of health, not the quality of the human, but quality of the health of the human being that's going to be born. What an amazing and easy, simple way to improve your bloodline, to make those little kids champions, giving them an advantage. Don't be lazy, go train, give your kids an advantage. All right, so I tell my children the story. My kids love stories. I talk about this on a semi-regular basis. But one of the stories, I didn't make it up. It's Milo of Croton. It's the story of progressive overload. And I tell my children that when Milo was a little boy, his parents gave him a bowl, a little baby bowl, and he had to carry it to the top of the mountain to drink water every day. And he carries it every day, and the bowl gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon Milo's carrying a big old bowl up the mountain, and Milo gets really strong. All these other things. I bring that up because we want to talk about telling our children stories that help align and train their thought process with working hard, and also the importance of getting better at things as we go along, right? So it's not about being active, it's about training. So working out is fine, activity is fine, but to improve, you want progressive overload like Milo of Croton. I do like the idea of testing your children. As they're young, they're probably just going to grow and get better, all these tests, and there's nothing wrong with that. Why not? Just like kids kind of get fired up when their height improves on like a little measuring board, why not have some other things that they can get better at, right? So, push-ups, you could do pull-ups, you could do a hanging test, um, broad jumping, really easy to measure. You just need a tape measure. Speed, if you've got a good stopwatch or like a laser timer, 20-yard sprints, conditioning. So we'll do a run. My kids just ran their first hard 400-meter lap on a track just a couple days ago, actually. But we also have, so you can do a run of some kind, and they both did it in just over 2 minutes. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of endurance, like long distance training with them. Like I'll just let play. As long as they want to play, that will build up their endurance. Stationary bike, I've got like an assault bike in the basement. Their legs don't reach the pedals, but they can stand and do the arm work, and we measure that. Me personally, when I was a little kid, I loved the mile. They ran that in elementary school, and I just got obsessed with like winning the mile. So second through eighth grade, the mile was always like I got to win the mile in second through eighth grade, just being kind of like a track nerd from an early age. I got I've got a rowing machine. I have my kids row 100 meters. That takes them less than a minute. Yeah. But if you look at this book, Growth, Maturation, and Physical Activity, there's flexed arm hang. So think about that bent arm hang for pull-up work. My daughter can do some pull-ups. My son's not quite there yet. But they can both do straight arm hangs, and that will build up into those similar movement patterns. I think every little kid just wants to see improvement. I think, and if they see mom and dad training, doing a little bit of exercise, it makes them feel better. They just know that's kind of what you do to take care of yourself, and setting the example and then testing them. Like they test and they get better at something. Wow, like pretty natural that a 6-year-old's gonna be better than a 5-year-old. But when they get to see the results, you start tying it into, hey, you did the hard work and now you're getting better. You just start training their minds that that's how it works. And if you see something going in the wrong direction, that tells you maybe they're sick, or maybe they're not in as good a shape anymore. Or maybe we used to do those 2 or 3 sports a couple years ago, and then they stopped doing them. And we just realized like my 9-year-old is less capable than they were at age 6 or something like that. So you might find some kind of lagging quality, something that you need to focus on a little bit more. I'm not going to read through all of these motions. I just wanted to include this for a couple of reasons. When I was a new father and I had a little baby, I wanted to know when they were going to do the next thing. What's healthy? What's going to keep them? What's a good marker that they're doing physically, that they're okay, everything's all right, neurologically, they're okay. And so here is a chart showing milestones and about what age that occurs at, right? So um, it's fun stuff. It's really fun to watch a little human being go from being able to do nothing to being able to run and jump and do all kinds of manner of things. But this is the pattern they usually follow because this is a predictable pattern of human motion. It's also not a bad way to train adults. There is something primal or basic in going back and doing these primitive early patterns is that you take an adult and you put them on the ground and you take them maybe not through maybe you don't have them like crawl like a baby, but maybe you do. Maybe you just start doing you do some back to belly rolls, some belly to back rolls. You do some pivot work, crawling around, sit-ups, and you just do like floor-based work. And there's something in there that helps the body regain motion. You're activating core muscles just like when they were a little meatball in diapers. It's all those little core motions that it takes to execute those patterns. There's this guy, Dr. Perry Nicholson. His basically the title to his a lot of his work is Stop Chasing Pain, and he does a lot of this crawl pattern progression. So um, if this is of interest, you may want to kind of check. He had a website a few years ago. To be honest, I'm not sure if it's still around, but there is good stuff in these really simple basic motions that we all started doing as young humans. And even though we're older, sometimes it can be good to take people and put them back all the way back to basics. Right. So Charles Poliquin was a pretty famous strength coach. And one of his recommendations is crawling. So he would recommend crawling for a young, when you're a new parent, it's exciting to think about, oh, when will I want this kid to stand up and walk as soon as possible. And Charles Poliquin would say, no, he would frown upon that because of all the good stuff that happens for the shoulder girdle, the muscles, the alignment of the joint, and also because of what's happening at the spine. Your spine is still hardening, and if you stay at a horizontal movement pattern a little bit longer, there seems to be more benefits. So, um, for his rationale, you would actually keep those kids crawling a little bit. And to be honest, yeah, I did kind of like I didn't stop my children from standing up, but I didn't encourage it either. And so part of it is on some of the theories of Charles Poliquin, and also there's an organization, DNS, Dynamic Neural Stability, and one of the principles that they bring up is that children who crawl longer are better problem solvers older in life. And that doesn't quite make sense to me. I don't know how much to trust that. However, the idea is that if you're stuck on the ground crawling is a less uh, efficient movement pattern than walking. And so when you crawl and there's something you want across the room, you have more problems to deal with in that excursion. And so the idea is that you may actually become a better problem solver. But there's like flawed logic in that because what if you just stand up? So I don't know how I feel about the problem solving and like problem solving skill set with thinking. I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I am pro crawling for shoulder health and for spine health. So talking about that a little bit more, what's happening with your spine along the way. When those babies come out, their spine is like cartilaginous, cart cartilaginous, and less ossified, less bony. So um, as they kind of look at our 7 to 10 month old, the more they crawl that spine, if it hardens in that position just a little bit more, it helps become a little bit of a more stable structure. So mom and dad encouraging these babies to stand up right away, not necessarily boosting their squat pattern later on in life. Oh, here we go. So we're talking about ossification here. So babies have about 275 bones compared to adults 206. So those bones will calcify together and fuse together. Oh, here's a part that I left out earlier when I was talking about crawling. Crawling requires both sides of the brain to work together because limbs on both sides of the body have to move synchronously, called a contralateral movement pattern. To make this happen, information must be passed along a highway that links the two sides or hemispheres of the brain called the corpus callosum. When a lot of information has been passed to the corpus callosum, as it does during a crawl pattern, new neural connections must be formed and strengthened. It appears that this can improve coordination, learning, and even behavior in both kids and adults. Crawling is not just problem solving, but actually like the neuroplasticity of the brain. But even as adults, there's something borderline magical that happens when we cross over our body and work in opposite hemispheres. There's even coping skills that have you do like alternating taps or do things that take your left and right brain and make them work back and forth. And the secret behind this, the secret in the sauce is that corpus callosum. So there's this woman who invents a therapy called EMDR. I don't exactly remember what it stands for. Eye movement, something, something or other. But what happens to the woman is she's told that she's like in college, she's college age, and she's told that she has cancer. And she's walking across campus and she's talking to herself and she's looking left and right, left and right. And she notices that the more her eyes track left and right and there's motion there, the better her stress seems to lower a little bit. And so this goes on. She fortunately survives her cancer, and she goes on to work on this theory of why does my eyes tracking left and right, why does that lower my stress levels? And it kind of goes back to that corpus callosum. And so now it's a go-to trick. It's a really strong medicine for people with PTSD is that they'll go in, they'll sit in front of this light panel where the light will beep or like light up and go left and right, and their eyes will track it while they discuss some of the things that they've been traumatized by, and it helps their brain process it. And it goes back to that both hemispheres working with that corpus callosum, and it's really, really good for brain health. So there is some weird little magic in there with crawling and doing things that have that what was it called? Contralateral movement pattern. So there's something in there that's good for us. And there's some different reasons why it's good for us. And if you're an adult who wants to do some fitness crawling, you don't just have to crawl on hands and knees. You can do bear crawls, crab walks, like gorilla simian shuffles or gorilla shuffles side to side. There's some good motion around there. Yeah, if you ever crawl on the ground, um, your hands working through that pattern, it gives them some extra strength training that doesn't really feel like strength training particularly, but really practical. And what happens when we're young? We're spending a bunch of time on the ground. What happens when we're old? We're scared to go on the ground. Well, if I've got a elderly client, I'm gonna put them down on the ground once in a while because if they ever fall down there, I don't want to be such a strange and foreign environment. I want to be proficient at standing up and getting back down. And if you are anywhere between 10 and 50 years old, 10 and 30 years old, um, getting up and down off the ground sounds silly. But what you'll notice as you age, you stiffen up, you get weaker. Getting up and down on the ground, it actually makes for like an interesting challenge, right? One of your biggest key marks or pillars for independent living is the ability to get up off the ground. And what we all want to do is we all want to live these long, healthy, independent lives. But at some point, if we're lucky, at some point we all get so old and weak that we won't be able to get up off the ground. The muscles won't be there, the mobility won't be there. So getting down the ground with high level athletes, with totally healthy athletes, is a great way to keep that skill set going over the years. It's not punishment, it's just a good training protocol for reasons that I've already talked about. So these guys are just they're just like playing around with motion a little bit. Uh, GMB is the organization, I believe. Just doing some unique patterns and motions. Look at how awesome it is for like the spine and the hips. It's gonna get your heart rate up if you're doing those things for several minutes at a time. You get like a little bit of cardio out of it. Core is working, shoulders start heating up. And then you can this Ido Portal, he gets pretty creative with it. He almost turns it into like I don't want to call it dancing, but there is just some really impressive activity that goes on with his movement flows. So not only are you gonna get some strength, some mobility, but you'll get some like neuroplastic benefits for the brain as well. Doing like an alligator crawl there. Let's see what else he's got. So, and if you've got kids, get down the ground and crawl around with them. Because you know what? You're not going to want to spend your kids kind of like, you're not going to want to spend your kids' youth when they're down the ground. You're not going to want to spend it only standing up and sitting up. You're going to be down the ground with them. That's where all the good stuff is for the first couple of years. Another thing for a human development, don't be so quick to jam your kids' cute little feet into shoes because you actually want to develop muscles underneath their feet. Just like you and I can squeeze our hand, see muscles in our hands, we have those similar muscles in our feet, but you need to grow those muscles at an early age. And growing them, all babies are born with flat feet, cute little fat meatball feet, right? So, but as they train and as they walk around, you might call it living. I would call it training. As we train their feet through barefoot walking around, those muscles get worked a little bit. If you remember back to that Dr. Kate Shanahan, the Deep Nutrition book, when it talks about the first baby in uterus, there may not be enough room for them and they get some sort of joint traffic and things like that. Putting a growing foot into a tighter shoe may impair some of the growth of that foot. And if you can carry that over to older age, if you've got weak feet or foot problems, maybe some toe curls, reeling in a towel, some dexterity drills like toe yoga, like picking up one toe at a time, kind of like you're pretending to play the piano with your toes a little bit, walking on your toes, taking care of those muscles. So there's a whole litany of things you can do to care for your feet. But one of the ways that you can benefit your children is by letting their feet get stronger when they're young. Let them crawl till they're done crawling. When they're done crawling, don't be so quick to jam sweet, awesome little toddler shoes on their feet. Do that to keep enough to keep them safe, but at home, when able, get rid of those shoes, let those feet work. So a little disjointed with my thoughts on what tests do with kids. Let's see, we did based on the growth, maturation, and physical activity text. Some flexed knee sit-ups. And they've got some tracking there. Standing long jump, vertical jump, throwing. How far can you throw a ball? Like you don't need to spend their whole childhood teaching them how to throw a big softball or a tennis ball, or whatever it is, but just to play catch with them and see how far back you can get. You're teaching their nervous system how to create power and rotate and be coordinated. And so that little athletic skill, you're teaching them how to do powerful things, right? And that's going to come in handy later. If you want to be an athlete, anything besides like a long distance runner or swimmer or cyclist, they need to be explosive. And even those sports need to be explosive as well. So throwing a ball is a really good little way for kids to do a little bit of coordination training, but also to just teach their body how to produce force. And I play a little bit more catch with my son. He's not quite 6, and he's already thrown the ball kind of far, like further than I would expect him to. But it's been improving over the last couple of years, big time. And so it's kind of fun to see that. So all these things are just fun to track a little bit, and it teaches them how to work hard. A few years ago, I did this TPI, which is Titleist Performance Institute. It's a golf organization. Um, and I did this level 2 juniors certification because I wanted to learn more about. I'm a father at this point. I want to learn more about working with little, these kids and what can I do to help these kids out. And Ernst Zwick comes on and kind of blows my mind with all of this talk about training windows and peak height velocity. And I'm going to share that with you guys. But anyways, kind of start with him. He kind of helps steer the ship a little bit, help bring a few things into my zone of awareness, I guess you'd say. But essentially, his message, and we will dig into it deeper today. During certain times of growth and maturation, certain training effects are more valuable or more impactful on your children while they're in certain growth windows. And so this is like the TPI, like junior athlete development model. And so if you see over here, it's like, what do you want to train the most when you're an age 5 to 7? Well, it talks about suppleness, which is like, let's just call that like movement quality, maybe mobility, speed. So why would you want to train speed at this window? The kids are short, they don't have very many muscles, they're not really doing anything that really makes you think speed. But what they are doing is their nervous system is growing and changing. These babies, these kids, the younger they are, their nervous system is basically more and more susceptible to learning. And the weird thing there is that speed is like a neurological skill. So that's why we want to do speed work or do throwing or power hitting or jumping. We want to do some speed work with these young kids because that's when their body is learning how to move. And then functional stability, let's just call that like kinesthetic awareness. That's can they balance on a foot? Can they do like a little obstacle course? One of the reasons that I do a bunch of obstacle courses with my kids, well, the main reason is they think it's fun. But I also put in balance work there and things that take body control. They're crawling under things, over things, they're bouncing along things. And then what we do is they kind of get to that 8 to 10 window. Well, that's when they start to get some skills, right? So they're able to take on more complex concepts. And so you can introduce like more sports skills and their attention spans elevate, or at least they should elevate, and then you can teach them a little bit more. And so it kind of goes through, and there's different ages for different windows and things like that. And that's what we're going to talk about because what you want to do is try to take advantage of what limited time we all have with our children per day and the limited time we have with our young children because before they're not young anymore, right? So you get these training windows. I started off that other quote from was about that one of the biggest factors with performance is time spent practicing a skill. I'd say the other number one thing that's important is that they have fun. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole too hard today, but if you want to learn how to make your training more fun, I have another episode that I did all about like gamifying strength training. We want it to be fun. We want it to feel like a game. Some kids can handle organized training. Some kids just want to have fun. Ideally, you're doing both. With the younger they are, the more fun it is, right? The more silly and like game-like you turn all the training into. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I would say if your kids aren't having fun, they won't do it for a long time, which means that they're not invested in it. It's not going to be a long-term thing. They're not going to end up being the best 10 years from now. Because what you want to do is you want to train kids and be less worried about how they are today, how they are tomorrow, but be thinking about what about when they're 17? How is their skill set on this sport going to be when they're 17? What's the best thing I can do to help them stay in it? And for me, I think about being fun. As an athlete, I don't mind boring things. I didn't mind boring things, but as a coach, I see that not many people just have like boring personalities and like like monotone mindsets, and so we have to make it attractive and entertaining to keep people in it. And if you're talking about spending time with your own children, make it fun. You're going to want to bond with these kids. Okay, I already talked about Range, the book Range quite a bit, or I won't say quite a bit, but I talked about it maybe enough. Um, but I wanted to kind of hear from Wayne Gretzky on this. He has a good little excerpt here.
For me, my love of all loves was baseball. I just wasn't as good at baseball as I was hockey. 1st of April, I would throw my hockey equipment down in the basement. I couldn't wait to get my baseball glove on, my baseball uniform. And I would do that all summer long. I knew kids that skated. I had friends that went to hockey schools. I didn't get my hockey equipment back out till September 4th. Well, my dad knew cross training back in the 60s and 70s. He was a big believer that every sport crossed over. He felt that playing baseball was a thinking man's sport. And if you didn't think and pay attention in those days, 7 innings, that your mind would wander, you would not be successful. And he thought that the common sense and the thinking ability of baseball would help my ice hockey.
So Wayne Gretzky, arguably the best hockey player that ever lived, he was collecting skills from other sports. And he loved the other sports that he was better at. He loved baseball more, he says. He said it was good for his mind, good for his focus. In straight, you don't know what benefits your kids will get from outside sports and bring them in. And a great way to be a disruptor or to be advanced in something is to have outside skills and bring outside skills in along with the skills of your main specialty. So, like, I think Steve Jobs took a like a calligraphy class in college, and that's where he came up with having different fonts on Microsoft Word or whatever it is. So, if that's a true story or I botched it, I'm not sure, but hopefully you guys get the logic. Is that having outside skill sets? It's called the principle of variation or principle of variety. The more we can achieve, or the better our performance will be at the top. Remember, that's why Tiger Woods is such a weirdo, is because he just stayed in like an elevator shaft, whereas Wayne Gretzky had like a wide pyramid to reach higher for his performance at the top. And then this is a father-daughter combo, I believe. And what they're doing is they're doing training. It looks like it's all swim-based training. Um, but the idea is that he's doing non-water based swimming. Um, so he's cross training. He's close. He's not telling her to go play basketball and make her a better swimmer, but he's doing some training that's not in the water to help out. All right, so kind of some neat little stuff. I don't know how old that girl is, but she's doing some pretty cool stuff there. And do I think that that's going to translate perfectly into the water? I have a good feeling about it. I don't know if it'll be a perfect translation, but I bet there's quite a few children her age that can't do those things. Um, she was doing some pretty neat stuff there. So you never know exactly what's going to transfer in, but I think we should all consider that you don't want your young children doing the same thing all week, every week. So whether it's a completely different sport or some what they call in the swim world dry land training, which means just training outside of the water. Um, that might be the way to go. She also now has a sweet like montage of her own training from youth, so kind of silly, but You're probably teaching these kids some good character along the way and hard work. And I like to think that the sooner the better when it comes to teaching kids hard work. So, right, there is something called the cumulative advantage or Matthew effect, relative age. And what it is, it's relative age effect. Okay. If you guys don't know this, the month you are born may impact the sport that you excel in. In the NHL, you get more birthdays at the beginning of the year. Major League Baseball, more birthdays in basically early fall. NBA, nothing in particular. NFL is kind of a hodgepodge. Now, I worked in the NFL, and we found that basically half of our team was born in March. So maybe I don't remember the exact details, but I think they were kind of an early part of the year crew, not dissimilar from this, but that was the 2010 Rams. If anybody wants to check it out, but basically what happens, the reason the birthdays are always in the same window, depending on what sport you are, the same thing would happen for like Premier League soccer over in Europe. The reason that your birthday matters in pro sports is that when you are a little kid and you go to join an organization to play soccer or hockey or basketball, whatever it is, the older you are compared to your opponents and your teammates, it increases your chance for success long term. When I first came across this, that didn't make sense. That didn't jive with me because I'm a younger brother. I'm the youngest of four. And I always felt that my experience training with my older siblings training with my older siblings, I always felt that experience, when I would go play with kids my own age, I had a better chance at dominating. They moved slower. They weren't as strong as my big brother, big sisters. But what happens when you keep people in that same pod for multiple years is that kid that excels, because like when you're 10 years old, on your 10th birthday, you've been alive for 120 months. So if you're 10 months older than one of your teammates, you're almost 10% older than they are. You may almost have 10% more experience. You may be 10% bigger. You may be 10% smarter. In the early ages, 6 to 10 months makes a really big difference. It doesn't matter much when you're grown up, but when you're like 5 to 10 years old, those make really big differences. And what happens to that kid that's a little bit older, that's just under the cutoff birth line, they get more coaching. Okay, Johnny, you played. Oh my gosh, you really show some talent here. Like, never mind the fact that you're 3 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier than the other kids. You're good. And the coaches are going to be attracted to that good kid who's really just good because they're older, and they're going to give them a little bit extra love and a little bit extra like coaching and guidance. And that kid's going to, because that kid got a little extra coaching and guidance, they're going to excel. They're going to play a little bit higher level, and they're going to keep getting better and better and better. And that happens for like 5 or 7 years of this like youth athletics. And then they actually become good by the time they get to high school. And then it just keeps going. They're always being treated like they're good, like they're better, because they are, but it compounds to the point that it gets them into professional sports. The Matthew effect is the phenomenon where an initial advantage leads to a greater accumulation of advantage over time. Imagine if your son or daughter or you got a little bit more. What if you got a little bit more coaching, like an extra hand on your shoulder every season for the first 10 years that you played something? Think about how big a difference that could have made. And it would build on itself because the first year or two, you're pulling further away over those first 2 years, and then you more and more and more and more. And so over a decade of like youth athletics where you're always had like the extra coaching, the extra like attention from coaches. I knew a mom that I worked with years ago, and she was really into her daughter's gymnastics. And gymnastics is a crazy cutthroat, high intensity culture. And her daughter had, I forget if it was one or two broken legs, broken to the point that she could still walk around on them. But she had like a 10-year-old who was saying like, well, I know my legs are broken, but can I still go out and compete? And the mom said, well, it's your decision. And I was just thinking like, I don't know. I don't know how healthy that is. It's good to train toughness and you don't want every little boo-boo to derail you. But broken bones feels like the right time to deload or to take a break from an activity. But not my child, not my decision. But there's just sometimes that it sounds like maybe you're pushing them too far. And if that child was to get another injury while training on a current injury, that would be a shame. And also, if it hurts the relation, if that kid decides 2 years later that that's going to be their excuse for hating their mom, that's a shame as well. Although, from what I understand, teenagers are going to find something, some reason to feel morose, anyways. So, all right, this slide really should have been closer to cumulative advantage. So, this is Daniel Cormier. He's a high-level college wrestler, very successful college wrestler, and also a very successful professional fighter. Let's see what he has to say about basically the Matthew effect.
But my son is in 8th grade, and he's going to repeat 8th grade for football.
Okay.
Are you into that or no? Reclassification. What do you think?
I mean, that's beyond my realm. I have no idea.
You never heard about it? Like, kind of when your kid, like, say your son's a good baseball player.
Yep.
Many great baseball players will do a year twice because that second year they can actually just train.
Gotcha.
What do you think about that?
I don't know. I've never been put in that situation. That's the first time I heard about it.
How old is your son?
He's 11. He's going into 6th grade.
Oh, wow, he's like super young.
Yeah, he's super young. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that your son, he is.
A lot of my kids did.
Yeah.
So I had a group of 8 kids.
Okay.
That are now juniors and seniors in high school. They all repeated 8th grade. They went to Dagestan. It was that group of kids. They're all state champions. 2 of them are going to Cornell. One goes to NC State. One's going to Michigan. One's going to Oregon State. Another one's at Oregon. They all got college scholarships because their freshman year
in high school.
Their freshman year in high school, they didn't have to wait to make the team. They were immediately the best.
Huh. I see what you mean now.
Yes.
So if I'm in 8th grade, I'm good enough to compete on the freshman team in a high school.
So you're in 8th grade. So you're my son. So you're my son.
Yep.
And you're 13, right? Sometimes a kid can be 13 years old when they walk onto a high school campus.
Yeah, it's
barely 14.
Yeah, too young.
So by repeating, those kids as freshmen were like 15, turned 16, whenever they're freshmen.
Yep. And then they go to sophomore, they're 17,
18, 19 graduate.
Oh, gotcha. So you're just repeating a year and you just graduated later.
You graduate 1 year later.
Yeah, because you're more developed. You're bigger.
You're more developed.
You're the older guy on the field.
Yeah, you are.
Or on the basketball field, right? What about the curriculum as a student?
Grade. You do a homeschool.
Oh,
and they got so you do a homeschool year.
Gotcha.
There's one where like all the Olympians do it. That's what they do.
Gotcha.
Oh, you know that a lot of Olympians don't go to school?
Really?
They don't go to school.
Well,
they do homeschool.
Yeah, I just met a football player, a dad who's the quarterback is like top 10 in the country, and he does all his homeschooling. He does homeschool, and all he does is train. He has his dietitian, he has his strength and conditioning, and the guy's like fucking 17 years old, and he's going to reclassify. He's going to go to Florida because the opportunity to get picked up is way higher. So I'm just starting to get, like I said, it's my son's second year at football.
I'm giving you the plan.
That motherfucker going to school. He going every single year.
No, put him back in 8th grade, DJ. You guys gonna have him. Because here's another thing, right? Think about this. If he's in 8th, right, and he's about to go to high school, that means you have 4 years left with him.
To get him done, yeah.
But you have money.
Yeah.
My mom was like, get to high school. This boy got to get out of my house. You take care of a child. You're good.
Yeah.
It keeps him in the house 1 more year.
Well, if I want his ass in the house
5 years with your kids instead of 4.
It's funny.
It's awesome. Look, mom was like, I won't keep that extra year.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to hear about that. Redo another grade, stay. He does 5 years as a high schooler.
No. He does
no.
8th grade, but he's more developed by his freshman year.
Exactly. That makes sense. Okay, let's get back on topic.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's a real thing. People are doing that. They are taking a year to grow and develop and physically mature, right? So a grown man is going to be a little bit better at football or wrestling than a young boy. So if you buy them an extra year, you buy them an advantage. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and ourselves and other friends, we're just or kids are entering into kindergarten now or over the last few years. And the narrative is often that with a boy, if they're even close to being kind of too young, to just wait an extra year. The idea is that that year you pay for an extra year of preschool, they get to emotionally mature and intellectually mature. And when they get to the classroom for the next year, they're in a better situation to be successful. But the idea here is that you're letting their body grow and mature so that they can excel on the field a little bit, right? So all the boys that might have played varsity, as maybe they didn't play varsity until they were a junior. Now they're playing varsity as a sophomore, and they're getting extra looks and things like that. So the advantage that you get there is pretty unique. I've even had I had a wrestler several years ago. Came to school for a couple of years. He left school for a couple of years, and when he came back to the same school, back to the same wrestling program, I barely recognized him. He went from a boy to a man. He came back. He was welding. He got a job welding, and I think he just welded and lifted weights and wrestled. And he came back and he went from just being like an average looking dude to being like a man. His shoulders were up to here, all his neck thickened up, all these muscles. And he came and he brought it, and he ended up losing, but he went undefeated to a national championship wrestling match. Lost the last match, but it was a game changer for what he was able to do on the wrestling mat. And then I actually knew somebody who did something similar. This is AJ Feely over to the left here. And when I worked with him at the Rams, he was a quarterback for us there. And he told me a story about being in eighth grade, and both mom and dad were college athletes. I think basketball was the game for dad, maybe track for mom, maybe they were both basketball. I forget. Um, but he in eighth grade, he ends up being like 5'6" with like size 14 shoes, and they just are like, well, we know you're about to have a crazy growth spurt, and so they redid an eighth grade year for him. Whether they transfer, I think they maybe transferred schools. Um, but in the meantime, he grew like 6 inches. So instead of going to high school at 5'6", he goes to high school at 6'2", and that changes his trajectory of his life. Um, I'm sure I forget he played basketball in high school, whatever. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't remember how it went, but obviously he played a little bit of football, and then he goes on to have. I think he did something like 14 years in the league. He had a nice lengthy career. Never a major starter, never a Hall of Fame killer, but he was an NFL rostered quarterback for quite a few years. He did pretty well for himself. So um, that's somebody I know that really had an advantage there. So I like this story and the idea of we are what we repeatedly do. So there's this little girl, Tori Allen. And I believe the setup is that mom and dad are missionaries or scientists, but either way, they get her, uh, this little girl from America, they get her out into a African village for a big chunk of her youth. And she has like these like little buddy monkeys. I don't know if they're her pets exactly or they're like village local monkeys or something. But she spends a whole bunch of time climbing in trees with them, like way more time spent in the trees than you and I would during ages 3 to 8. She gets kind of good at climbing. She kind of enjoys it. She becomes a wall climbing champion as a teenager and a preteen. They find that her hands are actually much larger than they would expect of a girl her height. Elevated grip strength. They measured one of her grip strength tests. They measured it similar to NFL linemen. Those are the big guys. So she's just, this pretty normal little gal, but her hands are super big and super strong. Um, and she has something else that's called a positive ape index. So most human beings, if you think about like the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is the sort of sketch like the naked guy standing like a starfish. Uh, your average human is going to have a wingspan, an arm length from fingertip to fingertip of about their height from top of head to bottom of feet. To have a positive ape index, it's missing an I on the typing there, so sorry about that typo. Uh, to have a positive ape index is to have a wingspan longer than your height. And negative would be shorter than your height, right? So if you read the book The Sports Gene, talked about it a couple of times already, there's a huge advantage in having a positive ape index. Think about it, if you're boxing, you can reach your opponent with jabs and other strikes without getting too close to them. If you're a basketball player, you can reach higher, you can reach further. Football player, you make contact first, just so on and so forth. Just swimming, you get to reach further and pull the water further. Rowing, you reach further back and pull. Every stroke will have a little extra like length to it, things like that. And even rarer in females, but they say that this Tori Allen had a positive ape index, right? So something may have changed her genetics in her youth, and it may have been climbing in a tree. Maybe there was an epigenetic effect from her climbing around in a tree during her youth. I'm not getting my kids any pet monkeys, but I did build out monkey bars for them inside the house, and I give them lots of opportunities to swing and hang on things, whether it's the backyard, like a trapeze bar and a climbing wall and a rope in the backyard, or just the monkey bar jungle gym inside our house. Oh gosh, I wish I remember what year this Michaela Maroney was winning medals in the Olympics, but she's a gymnastics world champion, an Olympic medalist, maybe a bronze. There's some kind of thing where she was dissatisfied. She made like a little face that like went viral or whatever. Um, but one of the things that I picked up from her time in the spotlight is that she said when she was a little girl, she watched the movie Tarzan, and to see Tarzan crawling around doing all this other stuff, she then started doing it, and she thinks that that's one of the reasons she had uh, uniquely strong and healthy shoulders as a young gymnast. And I heard that before I had children, and I thought, okay, we're watching Tarzan. Like I'm gonna push the movie Tarzan quite a bit because I want that same little narrative storyline run in their head. And it kind of works. My kids would watch Tarzan, they'd be more inclined to swing and climb and things like that. So a little bit of that storytelling goes a long way. I'm a huge believer in storytelling. So um, Tarzan for the win, I guess I'd say. But again, this Maroney, she claims that a lot of youth crawling around and pretending to be Tarzan built up her shoulder girdle and just shoulder health and allowed her to be superior at some upper body motions in gymnastics. Is it true? Is it accurate? I don't know, but I like the sound of it, and I have a feeling that it has impacted my children in a good way. You know, the movie is a decent little movie. It's got animals. It's got a muscular character in it who kind of makes them think that muscles are cool, and so for that matter, and I haven't even talked about the Phil Collins soundtrack. It's second to none. Okay, so my kids, they kind of know about hanging, and so my daughter just like she figures out that dangling is fun, and so we dangle and we hang, and I time her hangs. I see how long she can hang. She starts doing pull-ups at a pretty early age. Her body is just healthy and capable for this, slightly more healthy, slightly more capable for this one funny little quirk that we just do fairly regularly. There's no famous 10-year-old anythings, right? You need to put up until age 10, you're just laying a foundation. And then as you age and mature, you can excel. So it's really important to get these kids involved in sports beyond, keep them involved for another handful of years and really see where that potential is. Because for all you know, that kid's going to grow up to be 6'5" or 5'6", and putting them in the right sport and keeping them involved can make a big difference in what they can do with their potential, right? And one number that's been spouted pretty regularly is you match their age with how many hours per week that they do a thing, and you try not to go above and beyond that. So if you're age 10, you don't do it, and you love soccer or baseball or whatever it is, age 10, a high volume week should be no more than 10 hours of that activity. Okay, but if your kid really, really loves it, I'm not saying you have to like go like slap the baseball out of their hand, but you should probably water down the focus on that sport by including other activities. If not, you're probably going to make yourself susceptible to some overuse joints and muscles. So, giving the body a diversity of tasks to do can help reduce the wear and tear of those overuse injuries in that one particular task. It's not all about just prepping them ahead of time. There's also some benefits to making your athletes suffer through playing with the other bigger kids. Because what's going to happen to a kid who is outsized and outspeeded and outskilled is that they're gonna have to figure out how to elevate their game. They're gonna have to become more tactful, more skillful. They're gonna need to learn how to play when they are at a disadvantage. And then what happens is if they get that growth spurt later on, that physical side comes through with it, then they have the body and all the skills. So I would say if I could go back and slap myself on the wrist or slap myself upside the head for my approach to athletics, I would say I became way too fascinated with being big, strong, and rough in sports that wasn't necessary. My soccer game, I could have been a way better soccer player if I was less attracted to like the physical play and I just worked more on skill. Same thing for basketball. If I was and I didn't play much like organized basketball, but if I just had like a little bit more patience and worked on skills and tactics instead of just relying on being slightly bigger and slightly stronger than the average player, I could have done some more higher level play for basically any sport that I touched. But there's benefits to being a late developer. It's not all bad. You gotta create that skill set, tactics. I would say you risk either losing a love for it or strengthening a love for whatever you're doing, right? So if you're just tired of getting bullied all the time and losing, there's a good chance you're gonna tap out. But maybe you double down and you fully commit. Um, it's not all bad. Okay, what are 10 key factors to Olympic athlete success? Dedication, persistence. Another separate statistic that 70% of kids are going to quit organized sports by age 13. Um, that's like a 70 to 80% overall attrition rate by age 15. Again, if they're not sticking around to those mid-teen years, you're not even going to find out what they're good at because success at really early ages does not determine success at these older ages. And so I'm guilty of it too. My 5-year-old and 7-year-old will go do great at soccer practice, and I'm like, I'm on cloud nine. I think really got something, but that does not mean in 10 years that we're not going to get surpassed and left in the dust and things like that. So, number 2, support family and friends. 3, quality of coaches. 4, love of sport. 5, quality of training programs and facilities. So, not till point 5 do we even really talk about the more the resource dominant things. A lot of it is just being around the right people and enjoying the process. 6, natural talent. 7, competitiveness. It's tricky. How do you take these young kids and make them compete without breaking their hearts and getting them to cry? So, my daughter's soccer team last year in first grade, we lost several games, and it became in vogue to cry after a loss. This year, we lost even more games, and not one tear was shed. They hardened up a little bit. And by the way, we got way better. We just don't have the right bigger kid. We don't have those Matthew effect athletes on our team. So every team we're playing has like one or two really big girls on their team. So I don't feel bad or ashamed in the fact that we caught a bunch of L's. But we're gonna get our W's. We're winning in different ways. Like the girls are enjoying the process. They're getting better. Their skills are improving. A lot of good things coming from our soccer season so far. Um, Natural talent, competitiveness, focus. I've got my kids in Taekwondo. I love watching them focus. They do like a little like pseudo meditation, and it's neat to see the little ones create focus there. So I can see how that might carry over to just everything. So we do lots of type. We do a lot of that as able. So. And then work ethic. Let's talk about work ethic for a second here. I got a story for you guys. There's this guy, Lance Mackey. He's living all the way up north in like Alaska, and life is not going his way. And I think he's in and out of like drug rehab a little bit, maybe even some like run-ins with the law. I don't remember all the details, but he decides like he needs to change his patterns. He needs to do something else, and he kind of thinks like, what really makes me happy? And he thinks about his dad having dogs around when he was younger, and his dad did a little bit of like dog sled racing or had a dog sled for other purposes. Um, and he decides, I want to do some dog sled racing. And I didn't know this, but dogs, like the dogs for dog sleds, it's kind of like horse racing, how those purebred, like those horses that are high level races are really expensive. Dogs are kind of like that. It's like to get a good dog takes a bunch of money. But our guy Lance did not have all that money to invest. And so instead of just getting like the plain old like purebred dog that's got all the accolades, he starts finding these dogs that just love to run. Like it's in their personality. If you've been around dogs a little bit, you'll kind of know that they bring a certain amount of personality to the table. And he takes these dogs and he starts to breed them. Well, a big healthy dog. We're not talking about Chihuahuas, but we're talking about dogs that make good sled dogs. Um, but he keeps breeding these dogs that have like work ethic. They just love to run, and he breeds them. And he puts together a little dog sled team with these dogs that he's bred. And then he becomes the first person to win. There's an Iditarod dog sled race and a Yukon dog sled race. And I believe I think like they're like a couple weeks apart, is that you do one and then there's just a couple weeks to recover and you do another one. But he becomes the first person to win both of them in the same year. And then he does it like four more years in a row. So he's just he takes like that love of work, and he turns it into this dog sled team that just is awesome. And I think that's what we want our kids to be. We want them to be tall, for the right sports. We want to be tall for basketball and volleyball. We want to be fast for sprints. But we want them to just work, right? So if you're working hard enough, long enough, you get some good stuff out of that, regardless of what your status is, your structure is. There's just so many good stories behind that. Now it's not the end all be all, but if I can give my kids one attribute, I'd give them hard work. And I don't want to speak too soon, but I think they actually kind of have that already. I think they just kind of like were born that way. So, and then last of all, you need financial support. Unfortunately, that's the proof in the pudding, right? So, the fact of the matter, I guess. But these are the things that Olympics are listing for why they're successful. Olympians are listing why they're successful. All right, let's talk more about windows of opportunity training. So I put a little link in there to like that Ernst Zwick through the TPI app. This other link here, it takes you to Sport for Life Canada, which also uses this model. So both TPI and Sport for Life Canada, they use the teachings from this long-term athlete development text by Isvan Bailey. And we're going to dive into some of these theories here. All right, let's spend some time on this slide here. What you're doing is you're getting a timeline of what to focus on from basically birth till a young adulthood. I'll read through them now really quick, just list them out, and then we're gonna go into each of them a little bit more. So, up until age 6, you want to do like the fundamentals, and so you're just keeping things a little bit lighter. It's a lot of like body motion. We'll dive into it more. Teaching them to have fun playing, doing things like that. Fundamentals continues till age 9 for boys, females for 8. So if you're seeing that males take a little bit later on a lot of these protocols, it kind of all goes back to the womb. So every human being for the first few weeks of their life is a female, and then that's like your blank slate. That's what a human being is, and then the hormones start coming in for the male development, and then males mutate into males. And because that, boys and young men are often behind the little girls on quite a few things. That's a theory anyways. And so that's why little boys are going to stay in these certain phases a little bit longer than some of the young ladies. So it goes from fundamentals to sports skills. And then in those like early teen years, preteen years, you actually start building out physical attributes, doing fitness preparation. You start doing a little bit, as they age a little bit more, training to compete. You're making competition a higher and higher priority versus development of the person and the athlete. And then you're going to focus on podium performances. And at some point, it's not just about giving them skill sets and developing them long term. It's about what kind of performance can we squeak out of you right here and right now. And then when it's all over, you have active for life. And what are you going to do with them? Whether it's find them new sports to play or to turn them into coaches or whatever it is, you then have a new tactic for your post-athlete life. So Scaman's curve and sensitive periods. I'll talk a little bit about this today. I'm not going to dive in as deep as I could, for 2 reasons. One, I'm familiar with this material. I'm not a master of this material. And 2, I have not yet taken my children through these protocols because they haven't grown into them yet. So I haven't had a chance to practice hands-on. And the majority of my athletes that I see are on the back end of all these growth spurts and things like that. So some 4 phases of growth would be rapid gain in infancy and childhood and early childhood. So looking at their nervous system growing so much there, when they get to age 12, that personality kind of cements in. A lot of that growth and learning kind of slows down. They're basically like young. They're just young, as opposed to being not knowing who they're going to be yet. They're kind of like just young people right around that time. During the second window here is a steady gain during middle of childhood. So you get physical development coming up through here, not quite rocketing off physically yet. A 12-year-old is obviously going to be bigger than a 4-year-old, but the change that happens from age 12 or so to age 16 is kind of crazy, those short spans. So I myself had about a 9-inch growth spurt as a young teen. So I wrestled 5'2", 135 in 8th grade, and I was 5'11", 135 in 9th grade. So went from looking like Humpty Dumpty to looking like a stick figure, right? So let's go on that third window there, rapid gain during the adolescent spurt. So adolescence sets in, and then 4 is a slow increase until growth ceases at the attainment of adult stature, right? So sexual development skyrockets. Your neural development, not so much. Physical development, somewhat. So you're getting an idea of where the body's going to be at during those phases. So keep that in mind a little bit. Let's kind of ignore this residual training effect chart for now. Okay, peak height velocity. We'll talk about this on this slide and the next one as well. Peak height velocity is the period in which an adolescent experiences the fastest upward growth in their stature. Why is it important? Therefore, during PHAV, basically what's going to happen is that during these different explosions of growth, it's called a window of training. They think that like a window is opened where the body is more susceptible to certain types of training. And so our next slide will go into it as much as well. But what you're going to find is that they think that when your heart and cardiovascular system is growing more, training it then will forever mutate it to being more advanced, to being more efficient. The belief is that nature is allowing us to stimulate and cause an extra demand on these certain systems when they are in a phase of growth. So that window of opportunity is that while that certain system is changing a little bit extra, that stimulating it with some outside training can further cause it to grow and advance. All right, so now this chart starts to become a little bit more relevant. This is what you're training, how long you retain it once you stop training it. So strength. So let's say I'm lifting heavy weights, I'm strength training, and then I back off. I'm going to hold that strength for about 2 weeks, about 2 to 5 weeks. And these are just how many days you hold all these other attributes. So that being said, when we start talking about PHV, like the 5 S's of training, just because you are in a certain window doesn't mean I'm not necessarily going to stop strength training for 2 months just because I'm not in my strength window. I'm probably going to keep all of these attributes on the table, but when I'm in a certain window, I'm going to try and train my window. My certain window is going to be prioritized. If you already know what sport you're going for, you can make some more specialization with the training. However, a lot of our young athletes, if they don't know just yet, you could probably just keep some of this training on the table at all times, but just understand you don't have to train everything every single day or every single week. You can do a little bit of work throughout the time just to keep it relevant. This is one of the reasons, and this isn't the last chart. You guys will learn more in just a second here. If you look here at what's going on neurologically, this is why I'm not super obsessed with my children doing long distance work right now. But I do want to see them sprinting and racing around a little bit every handful of days because I know it's going to be good for their nervous system. It's going to be good for their muscles. It's going to be good for sport practice, right? The majority of sports, speed helps you. So you're looking a little bit here, pre-adolescence, talks about being neural, so sprints and plyometrics. So as I'm teaching my kids to run and jump, I'm laying a foundation that they can do those things better later on in life. And then when they start to mature and they have more hormones pumping through their body, it'll be easier to get stronger and to grow bigger muscles. That growth and maturation happens at different rates for females and males. One theory is just what happens in vitro for those first few weeks is that females are born a little bit more advanced just because they didn't go through that additional sort of mutation from like a blank slate over to a male. Whatever reason it is, males are just a little bit behind on maturation, right? The idea is that there's these little different windows of opportunity. So here's their age, here's what you might be training. Doesn't mean that you're not training any kind of strength or stamina over here. It's just that that's physiologically probably not the best, right? probably not optimal training. If you have to prioritize something, spending time on these things makes more sense, right? Certain times to focus on speed, right? So they have speed windows, they've got strength windows. This starts to give you an idea of when, where, and why you're doing things. It's the 5 S's: stamina, strength, speed, skill, and suppleness. Okay? Why wouldn't you work skill the whole time? Why wouldn't you work skill the entire time? Well, the idea is that psychologically, my 5-year-old son and daughter, they're more inclined to like chase butterflies or like tear pieces of paper in half than they are to listen to me lecture about how not to go offsides in a soccer game or the nuances of different kinds of takedowns in wrestling. They're like, to work on skill, they need to get their hands dirty. They need to have a fun, engaging environment. They can learn those things, but they're probably not going to learn those things through like a chalkboard and through little like motivational speeches, right? So you work with what you've got. Now, can they start to have more skills over here? Their attention span is going to go up, and their body control goes up. If you've been doing all of the other things we've talked about, they're going to have more body control. They'll be more skillful in basically everything. So if you think about maybe juggling, those little kids are probably not going to be so great at juggling. It's probably going to take them a couple of years to get older to get better at it, right? So they need to process, they need body control, all these other fun little things, right? It says the very top of the growth spurt curve comes a point where the child is growing fastest at his or her fastest rate. So that's the peak height velocity. After this point has been reached, the child's growth rate decelerates as they get closer to becoming a fully mature adult. PHV is used as a marker in identifying early, normal, or late matures and is a guide for determining directions in training programs. So I had my peak height velocity just like a little bit before this, like 1 year prior on this. So I was just I was slightly early on this chart, but pretty accurate. You know, I grew like 9 inches in about 1 year, and I grew about 1 inch or half an inch after that in the next 24 years after that. So I basically just all in one go. You could have had I would have been very, very predictable. Is that if you were measuring my height on a regular basis, and there's different ways to measure the height. I'm not going to go in that today, just because that's so into the weeds. It just won't. And I haven't really spent much time doing it yet. Any kind of height measurement will do. You can get more specific with it if that's really of interest. Okay, so going back to that chart, we've got a long-term athletic development model. So ages 0 to 6, what do we want to do? We want to make it positive and fun. We want to focus on agility, balance, and speed. Teaching them how to run better in a straight line as well as non-straight lines. For me, my best sprint work comes out of 2 things. One is chasing, whether they're chasing me or I'm chasing them. If you're fortunate enough to have a house where you can chase them in and around things in the house, this is really hilarious. It's good for bonding, also good for like high level effort. And then also, so there's chasing and then there's timing. So kids are competitive. They want to see, oh, hey, buddy, run in that mailbox and back, and I'll time you. And they will sprint. They will sprint like their life depends on it in an effort to beat that time. It's pretty awesome. It's a great way to trick kids into running. So it says catching, throwing games with various implements. Balancing and challenging but safe settings. So how are they going to balance? Well, there's walking on a balance beam. There's rollerblading. There's scooting. There's biking. All these things are fantastic, and to watch them get the hang of things is pretty cool. Jumping games. Jump the sword. So jump the sword. I steal from our Taekwondo instructor, and it's where you basically hold out like a pool noodle or a little stick or something like that, and they run, and you make it really easy to start, and they run, they jump over it, and then the next time you raise it up a little bit, and you just do that over and over again, and kids love it. I've also got my kids are able now to do some more complex jumps. We've got box jumps. We have jumps from the knees up to the feet. They're starting to do some cooler stuff. now that they are almost 6 and closer to 8 than 7. Water activity is really, really important. So in those early ages, unfortunately, one of the more common ways that these young kids will die is that they'll fall into water and just drown. Teach your kids how to swim, make it a priority. Really good for their safety, but also good for their athleticism. They're in there, they're learning new patterns, and it keeps them safe. It gives them an option. You don't want a 20-year-old kid who can't swim. You don't want a 10-year-old kid who can't swim. I will just warn you that, when my daughter first started swimming on her own, that the point that I felt like she was going to be pretty safe, it's a relief. It's a relief to know that you're kind of reducing their chances of drowning. It's good to know. Let's see what else. Ice skating. So different surfaces is good. So not only water, but different surfaces. Ice, a little bit better here. So active start still. Okay, so we're still focusing on active start 0-6. If I could get my kids into basically the top 2 sports I want my kids in are gymnastics and wrestling. The body control, somebody else said it. I can't remember who it was, but they said gymnastics applies to every other sport, but no other sport applies to gymnastics. Gymnastics gives you body control, body awareness, makes you strong, it makes you fast. All those good things that align with our neurological growth, like we've talked about. We've looked at multiple charts there. And then wrestling, I really like, because if I can't be a gymnast, if I can't put my child's body through gymnastics training, wrestling is probably one of the most similar things, with the different body positions and awkwardness and struggle and straining. Kind of strange that you're getting these young kids straining and working hard on things, but good for, again, like that character development, or at least work ethic. Let's not talk about character just yet, but maybe work ethic. It's not easy. It's not necessarily like fun all the time and exciting. It's kind of grungy. It's kind of like hard work. So if they've got the personality for it, good for you. Gymnastics applies to every other sport, and no other sport applies to gymnastics. Kind of the same thing for wrestling, is that that's just the way the body is moving, and constantly position based, slow enough to be coached. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about skateboarding or horseback riding, but those would be cool. I've got my kids on horses a few times. No skateboarding yet though. Okay, so once we've got some of that body control as we enter around age 6, it's fundamentals. Now we want to make them fall in love with sport, right? So encouraging them to be outside, playing sports, and just making play part of their day, whether it's with you or kind of growing their social skills a little bit and going and getting the neighbors to play a little bit. The catching, throwing, hitting, other physically demanding games, like now that dexterity and that coordination is going to come into play. Again, my son, almost 6 years old, is throwing twice as far probably as he was maybe a year ago. I mean, he's kind of chucking it a little bit. If you have the ability to, you want to put them in multiple activities, multi-sport activities, right? That nuance is something called physical literacy. If we haven't harped on this just yet, it's a little bit like that pyramid. The more they can do, the more skills they have, the higher achievement they're likely to have. So, and like Wayne Gretzky was talking about, loving baseball, and when it was time for baseball, he'd put his hockey equipment away and be a baseball player. I think that's kind of what we're striving for here, is that we're introducing them to activities, not only for that physical literacy, not only for the social aspect, we're trying to find what they actually like and love. So, and if you can avoid being concerned with game scores, because yeah, at these ages, it's fun to win. Like my dream for my kids is I want them to win enough to enjoy the process and learn how to be successful, but I don't want them winning every time. And then watch out for that early specialization trap. It's much more important to develop these all-around athletes at this stage. And I will say that even I read these books and I look at I ask my college athletes, that's one of the most common conversations I have with my college athletes for the last handful of years. okay, what was your childhood like? Like, when did you start playing the sport? What other sports were you playing? I ask those questions all the time. I read these books. I know I'm not supposed to early specialize, but last year when the soccer season ends, and my daughter had a good soccer season last year. I was really pleased with her performance. She seemed to like it as well. Um, a bunch of other girls on the team, they went and played indoor soccer, and I just thought, like, in my heart, I thought that sounds great. We're having fun. These are nice families. These are nice girls that she's around. Let's go do that. I had to stop myself from doing that because I said, let's focus on, like, maybe we'll bring Taekwondo back in and do these other things. That was a hard decision to make. It felt right on the back end. I asked some of the other families how the indoor soccer went, and they said, not so great. So it doesn't sound like we missed out on much, which was nice. But physically for the long term, what's gonna be best for my daughter? Probably not just another soccer season right after the last one. But it is very tempting to just keep the good times rolling. But because of what I read and learn and the questions I ask my athletes, I know that it's good for my kids to have that diversity in their activities. Okay, they age a little bit more. They're starting to train a little bit more. So foundational sports skills. So, learning the rules, learn throwing better, kicking more appropriately, striking with a tennis racket, better form, things like that. It says it's the most important stage for the development of sport specific skills because it is a period of accelerated learning of coordination and fine motor control. You should spend about 70% of your time practicing and 30% of the time competing. Because of thinking about those Skaman curves earlier, your peak height velocity, these are good years to become really precise with activities. They're starting to get the coordination, the attention span is rolling in, and also the window of opportunity neurologically is a good idea to be a stickler with form during these years. Encourage with unstructured play, experiment with new sports and positions, mix up environments, land, ice, water, keep it fun, right? So we don't, just because we're outside of the active start phase and the fundamentals phase, that doesn't mean that we stop doing those things. It's just that we pile on the more complex activities on top of it, right? So hopefully you never stop having fun. You never stop doing fundamentals, but you add more complexity on top of it. All right, now we're training to train. So this is when those young bodies start to look a little bit more like adult bodies. We can kind of bring more stereotypical training into their lives. That puberty hits, they're starting to get the androgens, the testosterone in their bodies that actually will grow some muscle. And so instead of just going to the gym to be active and fun and teach good habits, now you can start to expect some results. Not that they can't get stronger ahead of time, but they're not always going to bulk up and change their physiques ahead of time with prepubescent bodies. Maybe instead of juggling a handful of sports, maybe bring it down to 2 sports just for extra time for focus, but still not quite year-round specificity. Watching out for that overuse. So looking at that PHV chart that we saw earlier, looking at the 5 S's and trying to prioritize that training, make that your top priority during certain windows. Age 12, I think in 8th grade, you're in 13 to 14 years old. When my brother was in 8th grade, he was shaving a full beard. When I was in 8th grade, I was unnecessarily shaving a mustache and sideburns. I think I was just trying to be cool, but there was peach fuzz there. But my brother was filled out. He looked like he had a ex-wife at that point. And same age, not the same biological age. When this puberty starts to hit, you're going to have athletes that are kind of like my brother and I are separated by 4 years, but if we were in the same grade or whatever, when I was in 8th grade with him, he would have been running faster, jumping higher, hitting harder than pretty much everything I was doing. Because I was going through these awkward youth phases, but he had kind of hit some puberty already, and his body was just different. That's going to happen more and more here. Is the physiques are going to diversify. Some people are going to be left behind looking like little kids still, and some people are going to look like adults. Just some things to take into account here. We've talked about all those. The social skills. So people will be in the sports. People will be There may be extra drama from social lives that are growing, cognitive abilities. Some of these athletes at these ages are going to have good ideas, good concepts. They're going to be watching sports on TV and learning from those outside sources, emotions and behaviors. Iron levels in female athletes. I'm missing an E on the female there. I got to work on my typing. So something to watch out for there. Okay, train to compete is 9 to 15 program sessions per week, not 9,015 program sessions per week. Increased level of competition. They might be on multiple teams for the same sport, like a more laid back, like high school team plus like a travel team. May have to start working on timing out recovery and regeneration a little bit more. Their sleep might start getting a little bit worse. Their tasks and like life load might elevate. And psychologically, you may start doing more like life lessons coaching and like guiding them into adulthood a little bit. Training to win. So now we're talking about peaking in performance. Most of your training is sports specific, and you're peaking for major events. You may be pulling back instead of doing as much as you can do. You pulling back on like all of your competitive starts, right? So, and this is hopefully at this point they should become tacticians and active for life. At some point, that growth maturity ends. And they need to move on. They need to move on to the next chapter, right? So at the college level, I talk about 4 years versus 40 years. I wish I made that up. Somebody else did. But it's in the 4 years that they're with me as a college student, I want to help them be successful on the field there. But I also want to set them up for success for the next 40 years. I want to teach them a few things about how to take care of their bodies, how to be good people, and just how to be healthy, right? When they are 30 or 40 years later, I want them kind of thinking about some of the lessons that we learn in the weight room. And maybe they've been doing that for a few decades. For these ages, we already talked about changing your genetics a little bit through activity and changing the child's genetics through activity. Kids learn so much from their parents. It's just important to stay healthy for a million reasons, but also just so that they can kind of see that you train and that you're doing things as well. So you don't want to be the parent who tells them to go work hard, but you don't, right? You want to set the example. Like, this is just what we do. We are hard workers, and this is what we do. So your exercise habits, your eating habits, they say that children actually mimic the gait patterns, the way that they walk from their parents. Obviously, their accents, the way they speak, their brain just listens to mom and dad and kind of talks like them as well. Even your coping mechanisms, right? So I worked in play therapy, working on a master's degree in professional counseling, and about a third of our clients were children that were just perfectionists. They saw mom or dad being a perfectionist, and they wanted to do that too. But they're children, so how much of what they do is going to be perfect? And to a lot of them, that just sets them, they perseverate on every little task and everything they do. So from your exercise habits to your eating habits to your coping mechanisms, really try to set a good example for those kids. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up for part 1 of Womb to Boom, getting those kids to become game changers. Tune into that next episode. We're going to hear more about nutrition, training, psychology. We've got a good dose coming up. So listen to part 2 as well. Super important. Take care of those kids.
Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.